All right, thank you. I'll just click straight into the first slide of my presentation because it's kind of my background, which is what I was going to start with anyways. So my name is Amy Heintz. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was born and raised in Wisconsin, so it was just the school I always wanted to go to. It's a really great school for many things. I graduated with my undergrad in 2004. And then I did a master's program online through the University of Wisconsin and graduated from that in 2011. So I was able to do that while living in California at the time, which is really handy because my classmates were all over the world and a lot of them traveled for work. So it gave people an opportunity to get an advanced degree, but not having to be like in the same town all the time. I've been working for Intel since 2002. I interned for Intel twice while I was in school, once in 2002 and once in 2003. And then when I graduated with my undergrad in 2004, I started on full-time. Through all that time up until last year, the end of last year actually, I was an industrial engineer. So my degree is in industrial engineering, and I was a practicing industrial engineer for 15 years. Of my almost now exactly 16-year anniversary with Intel. So not that many people can say that about themselves. Usually people get some degree and then they do something else as their career. But my job title has been an industrial engineer up until this year. This year I switched into an IT role. I'm technically a systems analyst, but the role that I have, you pretty much have to have an industrial engineering degree to do it. The system that we own is an in-house system for just Intel that all the industrial engineers within the company use. So it's really good to have that industrial engineering background with my current job as well. So with that, I'll quickly kind of give you a general overview of what is industrial engineering, since it'll help you kind of understand my background and then where my tips are coming from based on my experience and degree. So I'm sure everyone has been in a Starbucks. If you haven't, you've been in something similar to Starbucks. Starbucks is a very efficient machine, I guess you can call it. Right, so if you've ever, I go through the drive-thru a lot at Starbucks. I don't think I've ever waited in a Starbucks drive-thru for longer than 3, maybe 4 minutes, if the line is longer than the drive-thru entrance. Versus Dutch Brothers, I used to wait in Dutch Brothers for a good 10 minutes on a normal basis. So how can Starbucks do that, right? How can they get so much throughput through their system that people barely have to wait while you're sitting through the drive-thru? Right? Well, they have people that are looking at their processes, right? They're looking at how many machines do I need? How many espresso machines do I need? How many machines do I need to heat up the food that we serve, right? How much variety of stuff are we submitting to ensure that we can get it all done? How much labor do we have, right? They have all those things. People are working on all that stuff in the background. As well as the layout of the inside of the Starbucks, right? Where do you put the espresso machines versus the heater machines? On the display case, where's the food? So is it easy access to get the food straight into the oven if it needs to go in the oven, right? And even the process line of how you order your coffee in the store, you order at one station and then you pick it up farther down, right? So that all helps with their process, their flow through the system. That's essentially what industrial engineers do. We look at all of that sorts of things for any company, any process, service systems, like a Starbucks, I could work for a Starbucks and help them with their internal processes. So I have this little icon, which I don't think people in the back can see, but it's one of my favorite icons when I talk about industrial engineering. It's pretty much, it's like a continuous improvement cycle, the plan, do, check, act cycle. But that's really what industrial engineers do, like constantly, which is why it's a circle, right? It kind of never ends. You come up with a plan, you put it in, you implement it, you then have to go back and check, did it give me the results I wanted, right? And if not, you have to go act on what you should still fix, right? Where are your inefficiencies now? Okay, well, we fixed the one with how many coffees we need to make in time, but now it's taking too long for the food to keep up. So if people order food, they're waiting to get their food, they get their coffee first, right? So do we need to add more ovens? Do we just need to redelegate how people do their work through the system? Any of those things, right, can help make the system more efficient. So that's, in essence, in easy terms, right, what an industrial engineer does. I did that for Intel for a really long time. How much equipment they needed in their factory to produce their processors. Obviously, Intel equipment is a lot more expensive than Starbucks equipment, but Starbucks, it's a lot more, well, it's not a lot more expensive, I can't say that, but it costs a lot more to increase your square footage just a little bit for any company, right? Whether you rent it or you own it, you have to pay for that space. So you need to utilize that space as effectively as possible. And that's essentially what I do for Intel and what I could do for Starbucks as an industrial engineer. So does anybody have any questions about industrial engineering in general before I step into the tips? Okay, so I did notice not everyone in this room is planning to be an engineer, which is fine, I assumed that. So I did title it Tips to be a Successful Engineer, but it really is just to be a successful professional in anything you're gonna do. Because my experience is as an engineer and for Intel, my examples will come as an engineering example, but they can be, like, you can utilize them in any sense. Right. So, look, I have my notes because I get nervous and forget sometimes. All right, tip number 1, have a voice. So I like this little icon, but by the icon I don't mean have a voice being the loudest person in the room or being the one that's always talking, right? That's not what I mean by have a voice. I was super introverted when I was in high school. Still am a little bit. You can tell, like, I'm a little bit nervous right now standing in front of you guys, but you get over it. But what I did to change that was when I went to college, I didn't go to college, like, none of my friends went to the same college that I did, so I had to meet new friends, first of all, right? And then I knew that I would have to talk. Like, I knew I'd have to be comfortable talking in front of people, so I forced myself to do it. I made myself, like, have reasons to do it, right? I offered to go back to my high school to talk to them about the transition between high school and college, and then I joined the Society of Women Engineers, just initially, and then I became an officer, which forced me to talk in front of 200 plus people at any one time. So I kind of just, like, I kept pushing myself out of my comfort zone to make myself feel comfortable talking in front of people, right? So I said I'm still nervous today, but I'm still gonna do it, right? Because I know that I need to, and it's good for me, right? Because you have to speak in front of senior VPs, in front of your peers, in front of people below you, in order to be heard, in order to get, like, your project approved, right? And in order for people to know who you are. It's much easier to get promoted if your senior management knows who you are versus only your boss knows you because you don't talk to anybody else, right? And they're fighting for you, but everybody's like, yeah, but so-and-so, like, we all know so-and-so or Amy, like, why don't we give it to so-and-so, right? So it's very important to have a voice. This is also typically more difficult for women than men, especially in an engineering field, because you are outnumbered. Like, women are still outnumbered today. The last 10 years, the number of women that have started into engineering has been the same. I think it's like 20%. So we're still outnumbered. You're still going to be outnumbered in corporations, just because guys have been in it longer, right? So you have to like find a way to have a voice and have yourself be heard. And sometimes that could be, if you're uncomfortable, I've been in many meetings where I'm the only female, but you could have a guy that's your advocate, right? And it's like, oh wait, if everyone else is talking, like you can have the guy say, hey, like I have something I want to say. And you can be like, oh, hang on. Amy has a point she wants to bring, right? If you're really uncomfortable, like bringing it up yourself. Find someone that can help you along the way. So, with also having a voice, you also need to be an active listener. So you can't always be talking, right? I like this little graphic over here. It's really kind of the steps to getting you to be an active listener. First, like if you're just like ignoring, right? Not paying any attention, which some of you might be doing right now, which is totally fine. You might be pretending to listen, which is kind of, I feel like, almost worse than ignoring. I feel like I'd rather just know that you're not listening at all. Selective listening. This is huge if you're trying to get out a new project and you think your project is perfect, right? You're going to selectively listen for those people that agree with you, and anyone that brings anything that you maybe didn't think of or doesn't agree with your point, you're kind of like, you're going to forget that. It's just not going to register, right? So that's not so great, because attentive listening, you're getting there. You're close. You're at least like kind of actively involved. But then active listening, you're giving feedback. So you're actually at this point having a conversation with someone, right? So you're listening to what they have to say, you're giving them feedback back on what they're saying, and they're conversing back with you. This is really where you get a good conversation going and you can learn from each other. So being an active listener is really important to being successful, because you also have to be collaborative, right? Everything I do all day is working with other people. As an industrial engineer, you're very much like a support group, essentially. So I work with engineers like Andrew on a daily basis. I work with VPs, I work with technicians in the fab. Like if you think about that Starbucks example, right? Like how would you understand their process unless if you talk to the people that actually did the process, right? And make it more efficient. Figure out where they're having issues, where they're seeing issues, right? You have to observe people, you have to talk to people, you have to ask them questions. And then today I work on a development team, because I'm in IT now, we do software. So we have our developers that do all the coding for me. I'm a systems analyst, which essentially then means I work with the business stakeholders that use our software to figure out what do they need, what is the system lacking, and then talk to the developers about, okay, how can we add this in? Is it feasible? Is it easy to do? Will it take a long time? And then we kind of like balance our workload, right, based on what the customers are asking for and then what we can actually give them, right? So it's all about teamwork. Like you learn about teamwork early on, right? I'm sure you guys have had plenty of class projects. If you're in any team sports, like teamwork is still important even in your professional life. All right, tip number 4, have empathy. This one actually females are way better at than males. I think it's the mothering instinct that's just naturally in us. But empathy is really important, especially when you're working with a diverse group of people, which nowadays, everyone wants a diverse team because it helps you really bring new ideas, different ideas from varying backgrounds. Everybody's gonna have a different idea, a different suggestion. So having empathy and really like putting yourself in someone else's shoes to really kind of like understand where they're coming from and maybe why they think that way. especially if you're trying to implement change. So also as an industrial engineer, you're constantly changing things, right? I showed you that continuous improvement cycle. It means we're always asking somebody to change something, which makes people really uncomfortable. Nobody likes change, especially when it's not their idea, right? When it's not their idea, they're completely adverse it most of the time. So you have to make them feel comfortable. You have to make them understand why you're making the change. You have to understand why they're fearful of the change, so you can then make them feel more comfortable about it, right? So having empathy is really important, and just having like a good relationship with people and having people trust you and understand you, and you to understand other people. All right, the last tip. Tip number 5, know your audience. Pretty straightforward. But if you're trying to get a project approved, you have to present something different. Like I have to present something different to the VPs than I present to the people that will actually be affected by the change, right? Because the VPs care about how much is this saving me? Either how many people, how many hours, how much money, how much additional profit is it going to give me? That's what the VPs care about, right? And how much is it going to cost me to implement it? That's what they want to hear about. If I went to the people that I was actually changing their job scope around and just told them that information, do you think they'd be okay with that? No. It would probably make them super uncomfortable. They wouldn't understand what was going on. Like to those people, I have to tell them actually what in their day-to-day job is going to change. Right? Like what are they going to have to do differently if this gets implemented? How is it going to affect them? Right? So you have to know who you're talking to, and change your presentation appropriately. Right? Even sometimes from peer to peer, it can be different, because everyone has a different personality and everyone wants to see different information. So some people are very data-driven, which is a lot of engineers. Not all, but a lot of engineers are very data-driven, so they're going to want to see the data behind it, right? But like marketing folks might not care anything about the data. They just want to know, well, how can I sell this to the public, or whatever their goal is to be that they're learning about it, right? The finance folks just care about how much is it going to cost me. So you have to tailor your presentations to who you're presenting to. Even if it's the same topic, you might have 5 different presentations based on your audience. So those are my tips. That's what I feel like has helped me be successful. Definitely having a voice, being an active listener, being involved in your conversations, being collaborative and a good team player, having empathy, having that understanding for other people, and knowing your audience. So, should be able to help in most professions, I think. But with that, does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that stuff?
Are you all already great at all of those things? Yeah. Have opportunities to practice any of those things?
Yep. Yep.
What's the biggest presentation you've ever done?
The most amount of people? The most amount of people was probably in college, through the SWE organization. But as far as work, I used to present to a senior VP quite often, and that was pretty nerve-wracking. It wasn't a lot of people, but it was probably the most time spent on a presentation. Because nothing could be wrong. You don't want to look like an idiot. You have to anticipate questions that they're going to ask so you can answer them. Which, by the way, it is okay to say you don't know, too. You can only prepare so much, and people can ask you a question and you're like, ooh, I don't know the answer to that. But you can say, let me follow up on that. Right? There's a way to say it without sounding like you don't know what you're talking about. That help as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.